I beat you.
Really? All right, well, good evening and welcome to the Federal Way City Council meeting for March 5th, 2019. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome. We've got, right before this event, we actually had a volunteer recognition event, and we asked several of those, we asked all of those individuals that were honored at that reception to stick around, and some could, and some could not. But what we'll do is I'll ask Tyler Hemstreet, our communications coordinator, to come to the podium and introduce those folks that we did recognize.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council. You know, we all know that volunteers play a key role in what happens at the ground level on at major events. They are the ones greeting participants, manning booths, signing people in, and handing out various items. For that work, they are acknowledged and honored, and rightfully so. But we kind of wanted to ask the question, what about those who recruit, manage, train, mobilize, and empower those volunteers? They are the ones who really work behind the scenes. So with the encouragement of one community member who's here with us tonight, Runell McCullough. Runell, you want to say thank you. You know, we wanted to publicly acknowledge those who work behind the scenes at a variety of organizations throughout Federal Way. You know, they are really a key piece of that mechanism that continues to make Federal Way a great place to live, work, and play. So just like the mayor said, we handed out certificates at a reception earlier this evening. So now I'm going to read off the names and have them, those who are still here, have them come up and be recognized. So we'll start off with Dwight and Shelley Pauls of We Love Our City. Willa Gaines with Reach Out. Jack Dovey, Federal Way Caregiving Network. Cheryl Colehurst, March of Diapers and Do the Right Thing. Cheryl's yeah. Mike Stanley, Community Gardens. Joe and Virginia Roney, Vincent DePaul Society. Lynn Ormsby, Federal Way Day Center. Hope Elder, Community Suppers. Sherry Edwards, Homelessness Task Force. She couldn't be with us here tonight. So Tracy Oster, Communities and Schools of Federal Way. Robin Korak, Multi-Service Center. Rick Miller, New Hope Church. Peggy Laporte, Fusion. Bobby Jennings, Federal Way Youth Action Team. Tari Free, Boys and Girls Club Director. Betty Taylor. Betty? Yeah. Jack Walsh, Sub-Zero Ice Cream and Yogurt. Jenny Chang, Loving Angels. Wee Shim Kim, Korean American Parents Association. And Rose Eel, Federal Way Farmers Market. Thank you guys for making time for us tonight. Congratulations.
Oh, and Runel? And Runel actually, was, thank you so much. Would you please introduce her, Tyler,
Yeah.
for everybody?
Runel McCullough, you want to
Thank you.
come up here too?
As Runel makes her way over there, this was really Runel's brainchild, and she used to run the Mitchell House over for the Multi-Service Center on 336th. And she's not doing that now, but she's just remains a fixture in Federal Way community, and this was her brainchild to bring this together. Runel, would you like to say a few words?
Okay.
And we took a big, everybody that got honored in the council, we took a picture before that. So, but anyway, Runel, go ahead.
Okay. I was a military wife, and so lived all over the world. At one time, at about 20 years old, I went to Germany. I followed my husband there, and we got there one day, and the next day I dropped him off at the flight line. I didn't see or hear from him for 45 days. He was playing poker the night before Gary Powers went down. So I got busy volunteering and had the honor of winning several international awards. And I got to thinking, all these people volunteer, but somebody has to oversee volunteers. And the one thing that all those people that oversee have in common, they all make sure their volunteers are happy, are recognized, given awards, given dinners. But sometimes those key people are really sort of forgotten. But they're the ones that really make everything go. So I went to the base commander and asked, could I please start honoring them? And I did. And I've done it several times in Europe, did it in Illinois, did it in Central California, Southern California. So I had the honor of meeting with the mayor, and I said, I really think you should do something. And I told him what it was, and he said, we'll do it. So that's how this evening came about. And I just think it's so important because all of you have such responsibility. I mean, when you take over a volunteer program, you have such a responsibility, and you feel it, and I know you feel it, and you care, and that's the big thing. And I thank you. It's given me a real honor to see it done again. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I think Federal Way, I don't even live here now, but I think Federal Way is wonderful. Thank you, and thank you, Mayor.
And thank you so much to all those great volunteers. We really appreciate you. Okay, now let's move on to Mayor's Emerging Issues and Report. So the first item that I want to talk about is we had an amazing response by our snow and ice removal personnel. We talked about that at the last meeting, and it's something that we've been touching on. But now I think it's really time to focus on and making sure that we have something in place for the next time there's a snow event. And we really have some work to do with regard to making sure that we've got a seamless shelter situation for those in town once the weather dips down too cold or when it's really start to snow. So I'm convening the faith-based groups, and we've sent out probably at this point well over about 140 invitations so far to nonprofits, faith-based groups, and everyone out in the community for the 27th of this month, March 27th, in this room from 11:30 to 1. We'll be providing lunch to those present. So if you're interested in coming, let us know, and we'll make sure that we can plan for the numbers in the room. And this is a follow-up to something we did twice last year, actually once in November 2017, and then in 2018, we did that as well, really gathering together, not only the faith-based groups but the nonprofits, and talking about making sure that we've got a safety net in our community. And while we did a number of great things in regard to the snow response, I think that with regard to making sure that we've got shelter for those out in the community, I want to make sure that there's good communication and that there's a definitive place for people to go. And there was a lot of talk. I want everybody to know that we can't just open up the community center without appropriate staffing and preparation. There is a protocol and a policy that's in place that the Red Cross will staff our community center if we have two events that occur. One is a severe cold event coupled with what's referred to as a dislocation event, major power outage, those kinds of things. And this is actually, as a result, this is a Red Cross policy. Red Cross will staff our community center if that's necessary, and we were ready to go. We had those steps in place, but there's a gap right now, and we need to make sure that anything short of that. We did not have a dislocation event. Any power outages were temporary, and so what we're working on right now is making sure that the next time the snow falls, that we've got something in place. And so again, March 27th, here in this room, 11:30 a.m. Everyone is invited, and invitations have been sent out via email and via regular mail as well. So, and if anybody has any questions about that, please let us know. All right, and then I had my State of the City address at the Performing Arts and Events Center. We clocked that there was probably a little over 700 folks there. It was absolutely phenomenal, and just really, I was really glad to see many members of our community there. And actually, there's an interesting statistic in that we probably had more people in that room for that one city address than all of my previous State of the City addresses, my first term combined. And so it really was a great opportunity. We had over 30 booths of community vendors and community organizations, nonprofits, and it was absolutely a phenomenal event. I'd like to thank my colleagues here on the dais for joining me, as well as my neighbors, our neighbors there as well. I'd like to say a special thanks to Kathy Arndt, who helped out with, so she made sure the visual presentations were absolutely, I think actually the official count, what was it, Tyler, about 720? Is that the count? It was absolutely amazing. So it was good, and we most importantly, though, we really talked about what's going on in the city, our vision for the future, and the exciting things happening, and the direction. And so the theme of the speech was "The future is now." And if anybody would like a copy of the speech or a copy of the PowerPoint, let us know, and we could send that your way. Okay, report on recent community events. We had the Sound Transit Tacoma Dome Link Extension TDLE Elected Leadership Group meeting, which I co-chair with the Mayor of Tacoma, Mayor Woodards. That was on the 22nd, so a Friday ago. It was, or actually 2 Fridays ago now. And that was a good discussion about, they talked about the operations and maintenance facility. And then we went out to myself and John Hutton and EJ, the Parks Director, the Public Works Director. We provided pizza to those individuals who did that snow removal. We're working 12-hour shifts, 24 hours a day. And so it's our way of saying thank you. Let's see here. We had the University Initiative Stakeholders Meeting, also on February 22nd. And that's where for those that attended the State of the City, you heard about the hub, and that's what they're calling the University Initiative. And by they, I mean University of Washington Tacoma, Highline Schools, Federal Way Public Schools, and the City of Federal Way. And a lot's happened in the 2 years since we signed the Memorandum of Understanding. And the soft opening will probably be sometime this June, and classes will be offered at the Hillside Plaza or Pavilion starting in the fall. So great things happening there, great partners on that initiative. We had the South King County Public Leadership Reception hosted by King County Councilman Pete von Reichbauer. That was on February 26th. I believe that was last Tuesday. Where's that? Yeah, it was last Tuesday. Great event, and thanks to Pete and that really brought in a lot of elected officials. We had from around the region. We had the King County Sheriff, the King County Auditor, the King County Director of Elections, who else? Oh, King County Councilmember von Reichbauer, but also King County Councilmember Rod Dembowski. So it was great to see everybody. And then, you know, city council members, not just from Federal Way, but also from our neighboring jurisdictions in Auburn, Mayor of Pacific, quite a number of folks. It's just a great opportunity to sit down and talk with each other. We had a ribbon cutting ceremony at La Quinta Inn and Suites the day before. And this is the old Federal Way Executel location directly across the street from the park. Just an absolutely beautiful renovation there. We had our SCORE administrative board meeting also that same day. And so there's been a lot of discussion at SCORE. I forwarded to council hold on for a second, everybody. Turn off my microphone before I do that. So there's been a lot of discussion at the SCORE jail about them taking a look at the effect of that institution on us, on the city leaving. And so they brought in a company named Burke Consulting Group, and they worked on that. And they provided their summary. And I wanted to make sure the council saw that. What's interesting is that SCORE has not really, as you saw from the memorandum that was, or the materials that they provided, there are no real scenarios that would save any money. And I think just as a representative of the city of Federal Way, that I sit on that board, I have to tell you I was astounded that there has been no effort to try to change their model. There's been no effort to try to figure out a way that they could try to save money for the owners. So they keep they made a reference to, we're going to need to know for sure by April whether we're leaving, and I just said, well, we've given you notice that we're leaving, and I made sure that it was unequivocal. But at some point, the SCORE may want to reach out to the council. I just want to let everybody know that I think there may be some denial on their part in regard to what's actually occurring, but we've given them notice, and I have to tell you, I'm pretty astounded that they have not made any concrete steps at major efforts to revamp their financial model. So we stand to gain at least $2.1 million per year from walking away from SCORE, and that will take effect on January 1st of 2020. Okay. Let's see, upcoming events. We've got the Pac-12 men's swimming finals at the King County Aquatics Center, March 6th through the 9th. And we actually had, they actually started and actually had some events this past weekend, which myself and several council members were at. We've got Coffee with a Cop on March 6th. That is tomorrow, and BNR Coffee. And we've got a new police substation opening in Twin Lakes. Right there on 320th and that little shopping area directly across the street from the Twin Lakes Golf and Country Club. We've been in communication. I've been in, myself and the chief and his staff have been in communication with the Twin Lakes Homeowners Association, and they really wanted to have an extra presence out there. And so we're in the process of finalizing a deal. Chief, has that deal been finalized yet in regard to the real estate?
We've received the lease from the property owner. We're currently sending the document to our law department for the lease to be reviewed. There is no cost to the police department. It will be free rent and no utility expense either. So they're willing to provide the space to us at absolutely no charge.
And why that is important, it's not a mini precinct or anything, but it's important for the same reason that we have this over at the Sound Transit police station, bus station, the Sound Transit bus station across the street, is that it gives our officers a location to maybe process individuals, maybe write reports, to sit down and either confer with each other, or a meeting location. It's a good place as a little ways away from the station to be able to work if they need to, and use as a sort of a home base if necessary for those folks on the western side of our city. All right.
Mr. Mayor, before you go on, I just want to add one thing on the Coffee with the Cops.
Yeah.
I believe that's from 10 to noon.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, council committee reports. First, we've got finance with Councilmember Duclos.
Okay. Actually, we had a very good meeting and a quick one. We passed, it's on the consent agenda tonight, the conversion of a Section 108 interim variable loan to long-term fixed rate. This would save us money in the long term as they are fixed rate, and the other has been increasing quite a bit, 52% over the past 2 years. So that's on consent because none of us had an argument with that. Swim up-to-date rates are steady. It will be completed in the fall of 2019. Also, implementation of the updated CHIP and SWIM rate adjustment for FY 2021. Vouchers and monthly finance reports were all very good, and no questions on those whatsoever. We will have more. We didn't have economic development presented, but we are going to have discussions on May 15th, July 26th, and October 16th. And also further discussion on long-term revenue. We'll discuss some at the next meeting and see if we want to, what we want to do with some of the topics or some of the ideas that came up with the ad hoc group. And that's my report.
Great. Before we go on, I forgot to mention, we've got on the screen there the ribbon cutting for the Panther Lake Trail, and we've got many of the council members there, and right to my right there is Councilmember Pete von Reichbauer, who was able to get, this was a project 8 years in the making, and Councilmember von Reichbauer helped us capture $900,000 in funding for this beautiful amenity for our city, and that's the moment that was captured last week. Councilmember Moore for LTAC.
Thank you so much. You know, it's kind of cool, Mr. Mayor, because I feel like I'm sometimes an ambassador of Federal Way. The reason why I say that is tourism. Federal Way is a happening place when it comes to tourism, and we're looking at strengthening off seasons, as I've discussed in my previous council reports. But right now, we are in full swing of the women's swimming with men and women diving championships. I had a chance to come and volunteer with one of those events at the Aquatics Center, and it was really neat to be able to talk to prospective directors and officials from other universities and various parts of the country to potentially come and use our aquatic center for the future. So it was really neat to be able to promote Federal Way to prospective officials, and I think that is really important. It was great to see the Aquatic Center busy. Also want to do a shout out to Tim Johnson. He is a person that certainly wears too many hats, if not a lot of hats. And so he also took the time to volunteer, and him and I had a wonderful time to connect and talked about Federal Way in itself. So anyways, that's what's happening right now, and I think I will end my report.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Kopeng with with land use.
Yes, land use transportation. We had a very good meeting last night. It was 3 hours long, which is heroically long for a land use transportation committee meeting. We usually are closer to an hour, hour and a half, but very good discussion. I think the key, the reason for the discussion, the meeting being as long as it was, is we were talking about the future of Federal Way. And some great things are happening as far as potential development with some master plan changes, and then looking at basically just how what we want to look like as a city. And I think the council certainly has some opinions, and the community did as well. So it was great to hear from everybody. We also had a robust discussion on the rental inspection program that that has been pushed for by many of the council members, and I think in particular it was very good to see that there's a very clear schedule for both milestones for completion by the staff, community interaction, and ultimately passage at some point next year. So I think we've got a good plan in place, and I definitely look forward to working with my fellow committee members, Councilmember Tran and Johnson, and I know Councilmember Moore is very passionate about this as well, and I'm sure every other council member that wants to be there, including the Deputy Mayor and Councilmember Lydia Sapadawson, and Councilmember Duclos. So I'm definitely looking forward to us partnering together to create a new ordinance for our city. So anyway, thank you.
All right. Parks, Recreation, Human Services, and Public Safety, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So before the meeting for next week, I'd be remiss not to mention the Senior Commission that you introduced at your last State of the City. So really excited about that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for introducing that, and excited to work with my colleagues on the council on the vision for that in the future, because that will go under the Parks, Recreation, Human Services Committee. And so excited about that. The next meeting for Parks will be next Tuesday, March 12th, from 5 to 7 here in the Hylobus room. We have a number of issues. We're talking about the Parks and Rec Open Space Plan, Human Services Commission Work Plan, as well as CDBG Block Grant Annual Action Plan. We'll also be talking about the potentially broadcasting our meetings. So that's something that Councilmember Moore has raised around either, through some type of mechanism, making sure that our committee meetings are being broadcasted to the community. So looking forward to that discussion and what that could look like. We'll also be talking about potential emergency shelter guidelines and criteria for what that could look like in our city in the future. And then finally, I did want to mention, so not this meeting, but in the April meeting, we're going to start having quarterly crime reports from our chief. So thanks, Chief Wong, for agreeing to do that. And so we'll be talking about crime stats and the types of crime, because one thing that we probably all noticed is on social media, there's a lot of data that's being thrown out there in the community around crime. So we want to clear some of that up. And so I want to make sure that we're talking about that in our committee. We'll also be talking about response times, annual goals for the department, staffing levels, overtime, so everything related to crime in our police. So that'll be starting April 9th. But again, the next meeting's next Tuesday, March 12th, here at City Hall, 5 o'clock.
All right, now the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. We've had some questions about the retreat video and when that will be available for people to see. So the retreat started around 8 o'clock and ended around 3:45. And as in the past, Mike Ziak, who was taping it for us, is putting it together into a nice, tidy, maybe an hour long, I'm not sure how long it'll be. And he has been working on it, but he's not ready for it. He's not done with it yet. So we are hoping that it'll be done soon, but I don't have a date when it'll be done. And I know people have been anxious on Facebook to see it, and we want to get it out there too for you, but we are not in charge of when it will be done. It'll be done when it's done, and it'll be good. It'll be great. The City Council, as we said we were going to do at our last council meeting, we had a letter written and we sent it to the Sound Transit Board in support of having the maintenance site for the future light rail extension at the Midway landfill. The City of Kent is putting some money into a study to convince Sound Transit that that site is buildable. And I think that's an awesome thing that the City of Kent is doing, because if it doesn't go somewhere in Kent, it's going to come somewhere in Federal Way. So we need to support Kent in their efforts. There will be a community meeting on March 12th at the PAC from 6 to 8. Sound Transit will be talking about the 6 sites, and I would encourage you all to come so you can see what we're seeing. It's good information. There'll be opportunity for you to ask as many questions as you want and see the pictures that we've been seeing. As Councilmember Johnson stated, the council will soon be working on creating the new senior commission. And if you have any ideas of what you'd like this commission to do, please let us know. We need to decide as a council what we would like to see the commission work on, and then after they're formed, then they create a work plan, and then we would approve that. And I think it was last Tuesday night, Councilmember Sefa Dawson and I attended the King County Charter Review meeting, which was held at the community center, and we had representatives from King County there. We had I counted 11 citizens. Councilmember Sefa Dawson counted 15, so there weren't a lot of people, but we found out about it the day before it was happening. And so for the citizens that came, it was very interesting. They have in looking at their charter and updating their charter, which is similar to a constitution for local governments. There are 8 items that they're discussing. One is the civilian oversight of law enforcement, which county officials should be elected, public financing of campaigns, surplus land for housing, representation of the deceased family in inquests, ranked choice voting, size of the county council. It used to be 13 and it's down to 9 now. Should it be larger? And meeting the demand of King County. We are one of the largest counties in the country. So you could go to kingcounty.com and you could click on charter review and find this information and give feedback to the county, because they will be updating their charter, and it's really important for us to be part of that. You know, we're the local government, but they're the local government for us also, and for those of you who are in unincorporated King County, they are your council. So it's important that you have the ability to be part of that. Thank you.
All right. Now for the most important part of the evening, citizen comment. We've got our first one is Bob Dockstetter, then Catherine Festa, then Tashana Nash for 5 minutes, and then Dana Holloway. Evening, Bob.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Mayor Farrell, Deputy Mayor Honda, City Council, and staff. My name is Bob Dockstetter. One of the hats I wear is I'm the president of the Kiwanis Foundation of Federal Way, which is a very small foundation affiliated with the Kiwanis Club of Federal Way. And over the course of the last few years, we've been able, thanks to the generosity of several donors, to provide some support to the City of Federal Way's Recreational Inclusiveness Program, which is managed by none other than Kevin Hutchinson, standing right behind me. And so, tonight, it gives me great pleasure to present to the city, through Kevin, on behalf of the city, a grant of $1,150 for the Friendship Theater Program of the Recreational Inclusiveness Program.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. Kevin, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple words. I just want to thank Kiwanis. They've been working with us for over 8 years now and support us in many ways. They help us run a self-advocacy group called the Action Club. That's the last Tuesday of every month, and that's open to the public. And then this grant in particular helps our actors and actresses with props and costumes for our Friendship Theater program. And they also help us raise money for our scholarship program, which has helped to provide scholarships for over 130 adults with developmental disabilities to participate in our life skill program. So thank you very much, Kiwanis. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you for your work. As a fellow Kiwanian, along with my deputy mayor, the president of the club, we say thank you so much. And thank you, Bob, for coming.
The immediate past president.
Immediate past president. That's right. All right. Okay. Catherine Festa.
Mayor Farrell, Deputy Mayor Honda, council members, I'm really happy to be here tonight. I understand that, you know, I commute every day from Federal Way to Seattle, and Federal Way really is a bedroom community, and I love my bus. And I'm really excited about the light rail coming out this way, but I'm not excited about the size of the garage. It's only 400 cars. If you try to park in the transit center anytime, you can't find a parking spot if you're not there before 7 a.m. And I think that the way that the city is growing, that I think that a 400-car garage is not going to be big enough for the light rail. And I think that, I know that Sound Transit is difficult to work with, but if we could find any way to make a bigger garage so that when the city grows, we'll have enough room for parking. People who are on low income, they can't, or they live out further, they don't have any bus routes to get into the transit center. I also wanted to remind everybody that the Vets and Senior Human Service Levy through King County is rolling out their plan, and they've got a meeting next Thursday at the Federal Way Library at 10:30 to 12:30 at the First Avenue Library, and it's on Commercial Sexual Exploitation Collaborative. So I hope you guys can join me on that next Thursday. I'll be there. I invited the Federal Way Coalition Against Trafficking as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Catherine and I used to ride the bus in every day on our favorite 177 bus, so. Thank you. All right, Tashana Nash for 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Tashana Nash, and I would like to talk about the potential loss of the mature urban forests located on the former Weyerhaeuser property if IRG's proposed warehouse plans are approved. According to our calculations, based on aerials of the campus, there will be nearly 4 million square feet, or 91 acres of trees that will be clear-cut to make way for 1.5 million square feet of warehouses. This lost forested land equates to 25 Costco buildings, with the majority of the cutting concentrated on the north end of the property, where a warehouse roughly the same size as the Commons Mall is proposed. A plan that involves building a structure the size of the Commons Mall on the east side of I-5 is not a plan that preserves the character of the campus. As cities around the world scramble to make more urban green space for their growing populations, Federal Way has the opportunity to preserve a green space over half the size of Central Park. Dr. King Lee, chairman of the Japanese Society for Forest Medicine, has developed a wealth of research showing that after time in the forest, we sleep better, have a boosted immune system, and are in a better mood. The forest also lowers our blood pressure, our stress, our blood sugar levels, and it improves concentration and memory. It lifts depression. It improves pain thresholds, increases energy, increases anti-cancer protein production, and increases the count of the body's natural killer, or NK cells. Dr. Lee says that indeed, doctors throughout the world are now prescribing spending time in nature rather than a pill for a wide range of ailments and conditions, from addictions and depression to high blood pressure, obesity, and diabetes. March 21st is International Day of Forests, and I would like to invite all of you and our community at large to visit the campus this month. Find a trail. I recommend the one just east of the Meadow, north of 336th Street, and prepare to be amazed that we have this gift in our region, and be overwhelmingly grateful that it's not too late to save it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Holloway, and then Richard Pearson.
Good evening. My name is Dana Holloway. Tonight, I want to voice my concern about the disruption Federal Way will be experiencing for the next 11 years, from 2019 to about 2030, due to multiple large construction projects. It is critical that the city has a well-developed vision with supporting short and mid-range plans to mitigate these and other developments. The city will significantly be impacted by Sound Transit Federal Way link extension from 2019 to 2025, the Tacoma Dome extension from about 2024 to 2030, which includes the South Federal Way link extension. 2 of the 6 final locations for the Sound Transit Operations Maintenance Facility South are in Federal Way, and that's to be opened by 2026. WashDOT has 3 major projects in and around Federal Way over the next 16 years. The one that was most impact, I think, on Federal Way would be the I-5, SR 161, SR 18 triangle improvements. That construction is from about 2023 to 2027. Besides the construction disruptions, the city will lose revenue. Sound Transit and WashDOT do not pay property tax. Businesses which are displaced or closed due to Sound Transit 3 may or may not relocate to different locations in Federal Way. Customers who do not want to fight the construction disruption to patronize businesses will impact those businesses. Loss of sales tax. And the affordable housing that will be built on the surplus Sound Transit 3 property will be exempt from property taxes from 10 to 12 years. Again, it is critical the city has a well-developed vision and supporting short and mid-range plans to mitigate these and other developments, including reviewing and updating Federal Way Revised Code for zoning impact fees, such as the Transportation Concurrency Management, Chapter 19.90, Transportation Impact Fees, Chapter 1991. Mitigation of Development Impacts, Chapter 19100. Multifamily Dwelling Unit Limited Property Tax Exemptions, Chapter 3030. This has to be a priority of the mayor, the council, and the city staff. This would be a perfect time to hire a chief administrative officer as identified in Federal Way Revised Code 2.11.20 as an assistant to the mayor. Thank you.
All right. Richard Pearson.
Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, other council members, staff, citizens, and visitors. First off, I want to apologize to council members that were present at the Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting yesterday, and Brian Davis specifically, for the statement that I made regarding my reporting of Brian Davis's statement that at the that he made at the February 20th Planning Commission meeting. After considerable Planning Commission questioning of the Transportation Comp Plan amendment to extend the Plan 324th to Weyerhaeuser Way, I reported that Brian Davis said to the effect at the same Planning Commission meeting that unless the extension is approved, DeVita will leave and 1,000 well-paid CPA jobs with them. Based on my notes from the meeting, reviewing the audio file of the Planning Commission meeting and transcribing what I heard, Brian Davis saying it is more like if a business says that is bringing 1,000 CPA jobs we don't like, to use jobs as a criteria, but for the this minor adjustment, we feel it appropriate to accommodate. I apologize for the misreporting. However, I do not believe the adjustments are minor. The comp plan depicts a downtown traffic dispersion corridor to the east of I-5 linked by the extension of 324th South to 32nd Avenue South. This amendment to the comp plan will destroy or seriously modify the downtown traffic dispersion attributes of the comp plan and add considerable social, economic, environmental costs to our citizens. Specifically, the public costs borne by our citizens include increased travel miles, time and cost, traffic congestion, safety issues, and more fossil fuel emissions into the atmosphere. In addition, the extension goes through a wetland and will eliminate a forest buffer recognized by the IRG CP1 zoning along the north boundary. Also, the proposed extension is longer by approximately 200 feet than the comp plan, adding more costs to be borne by the taxpayers. And finally, the intersection with the proposed extension is on a curve and will add more cost than going to an already existing roundabout that should be considered as an alternative to the comp plan. 2 weeks from today, you will have the responsibility to make a decision on whether a good business for our community should be granted a deviation to the comp plan that brings with it significant economic, social, environmental costs to our community, as compared to an alternative plan that uses existing roads. I look forward to talking to each of you about this before our next council meeting.
Suzanne Vargo. And then Isaiah McAtan.
Sorry, just took some water there. Thank you. Hi, Council, Mayor, citizens. I have two things to talk about today. One is the rezone area over by Wildway, Spring Valley. Again, I would just like to reiterate that the topography cannot handle a high-density build-out like you have. It was zoned low-density back in 1952 by the King County Commissioners, Planner Commissioners, for rural character protection of, preserving visual trees, protecting the edges of the Federal community, and to protect and preserve environmentally sensitive areas, we know it's our highly sensitive area, and agricultural lands. Abbey Winery is an excellent example of why we should keep these agricultural lands. The land cannot handle it. It's made out of Vachon-Till sandy loam, and so this is why we have these large acreage to protect this. So the winery is a great example of attractive, economical, and it is helpful to our lands. The tree buffer we're all talking about, we want to punch a road through. This was put in for Brittany and Regency Woods. The trees not only provide us cleaner air, water, and erosion, but the trees are critical for the macroinvertebrae that are the primary food source for our salmon. And they live throughout the trees. They travel through the creek using the stones, the trees, and we need to have that. So to take away that buffer would absolutely ruin air quality and noise for all of those residents. Yesterday at the LUTC, we talked about the 324th ramp, and Jesse and Mr. Tron were very thoughtful to say that they would like to hold off on an approval decision, and the leader of the LUTC pretty much manipulated the situation, bullied them, and then went to legal counsel, where legal said that there is actually not a code for refusing. So we can approve the measure with a refusal, but the council itself is not able to take more time, be more thoughtful, and come up to a clear decision. That is their right. And so I ask, could we please work on this code? Otherwise, I don't know why these council members are here. If we can get just wrangled and manipulated and they actually don't have a say, that is a problem. Also, petroleum pipeline, both in the rezone, both at Weyerhaeuser. Again, the leader of this was very lackadaisical. A question was asked, how many times will the pipeline be traversed? And cut this person off and just basically said, okay, great, we're experts at crossing the pipeline. No, we are not. Number one reason for failure is developers who do not have any information about this pipeline. I've researched it. I'd ask you to do the same. Federal Way and IRG both have franchises, so you may have some control over that. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. And I've got the written letter. Did you want that read, or do you want?
He wants it read.
Okay. Okay, so, okay, you sure? Okay. All right, Isaiah, if you change your mind, the podium's there for you, okay? Isaiah McAtana is going to be a future leader in this community. I'm sure he's going to be on our city council at some point. So here, we've got a letter. Can you have that read? I'm sorry, you guys, I didn't see the first line of it at first about having it read. So thank you. Thank you for being here, Isaiah. And Cynthia. Don't worry about the time, please. Just read the whole thing.
March 5th, 2019, dear Mayor and City Council, my name is Isaiah McAtana and I'm 11 years old. I want to share with you what happened to me on Thursday, February 21st at the community center. I don't feel comfortable sharing my story in person because I'm too embarrassed and still very angry. My mom dropped me off at the community center for open swim a little before noon. She usually comes in with me, but we couldn't find my goggles. My mom dropped me off for swimming so she could go get some goggles. It was midwinter break and lots of other kids were swimming during open swim at the community center too, as it was also their winter break. My mom brought me there on Tuesdays and Wednesdays that week as well, so I had met a lot of kids. I was so excited to meet up with my friends so we could swim together and then have a snack at the community center cafe afterwards. I'm usually hungry after swimming, so my mom treats me to Hot Pockets. Sometimes I have 2 Hot Pockets and I eat carrots and hummus and some of the fruit at the cafe. Anyway, I walked into the community center, swiped my card, and was about to walk towards the gates headed to the pool area when the lady behind the counter asked me where I was going. This bothered me when she asked me the question because she saw I had my swim bag and she had seen me in there the last 2 days when I swiped my membership card to go swimming. I told her I was going swimming and she asked me how old I was. I've been going to the community center since I was 4 years old, almost every Saturday for basketball, on Fridays for Kids Love Soccer and swimming lessons. My parents work out there, and I've had a few birthday parties there at the center. This was the first time someone behind the desk asked me how old I was. Even though I was annoyed, I answered the question and said, I'm 11. Then the lady behind the counter asked me where my mom was. I explained my mom went to get me some goggles because she couldn't find mine at home and the chlorine really bothered my eyes. I was going to change into my swimming suit and then she would be back with some goggles. The lady then told me that I had to call my mother to come get me, that I couldn't swim because I'm not old enough to be in the building without supervision. I was so angry because this had never happened to me before. Also, there were kids who had walked in just before me and swiped their cards and there was no adult with them. The lady behind the counter didn't ask them where they were going or how old they were. 2 of the kids were younger than me, 9 and 7. I know this because I met them on Tuesday in the pool and we played together. After open swim closed, we met up at the cafe. They had their lunch boxes and got drinks from the cafe, so my mom let me eat with them. I had 2 Hot Pockets, carrots, and hummus. We learned that they were dropped off by their mom and she would pick them up after 1:30. They were supposed to eat their lunch after swimming and wait for their mom, so we waited with them on Tuesday. Their mom picked them up around 1:45. I wanted to ask the lady behind the counter why she didn't tell those kids who had gone before me that they had to call their mom and wouldn't be able to swim either. I picked up the phone and called my mom. She didn't answer, so I called again. The lady behind the counter said that I had to move out of the walkway so others could get by, but the phone was near the walkway and I was trying to call my mom like she'd told me to. The lady behind the counter was trying to tell me how to dial an outside line. I was so mad, frustrated, and embarrassed, all I could do was cry. That's when the lady behind the counter stood up, came from behind the counter, and escorted me to come sit behind the counter on a stool and to keep trying to call my mom. My mom was really upset when she picked me up. At the community center, there are signs in the pool area that kids 6 and under must be in the pool with an adult. There are signs in the weight room that say you have to be 14 and up to use the weights, and there are signs on the wall of the indoor track that say what age limit it is to use the track. So how come there are no signs in the main part of the community center about the rule that kids 12 and under need to have a parent or adult in the building? How come I was the only kid stopped by the lady behind the counter that day? How come she didn't stop any other kids the day before or the day before that? How come the other kids who were there without a parent, who were definitely much younger than me, weren't stopped to ask to call their mom? How come the lady behind the counter made me sit behind the counter when I didn't do anything wrong? And when the other kids knew I walked into the center, they saw me sitting behind the counter and they looked at me as if I were in trouble, like I had done something wrong. I was so scared, upset, but most of all I was annoyed. Why couldn't the lady at the counter just ask for my mom's number and told my mom the situation while I waited at the cafe? Is this the community center's policy to embarrass kids and scare them? Because that is what happened to me and that's how I felt. I did end up swimming and seeing those same kids in the pool that day. Their mom wasn't there with them, and my mom and I sat with those kids ages 9 and 7 and with their cousin, age 11, at the cafe when swimming was over until their mom picked them up at 1:35. I was too upset to eat my Hot Pocket that day. That day, there were several kids sitting in the wooden chairs and seats around the fireplace after swimming. Some of them were with adults, but most of them weren't. Most of the kids were under age 12. My mom said it was important for me to share my story with the council. I told her no, that I was too annoyed, and that it's just the way it is for people like us. My mom asked me, people like us? Yes, I explained to my mom, black people. That is just the way it is for us. My mom's eyes filled with tears and said that's why I had to tell the council. She said a lot of other stuff too. The only difference between me and all those other kids who weren't stopped is the color of my skin. What would you have done? How would you think this would make you feel? And what changes will be made to make sure the community center's rules are practiced fairly and don't just end up hurting kids like me? All I wanted to do was swim. Isaiah Makotan.
Thank you very much. So I have to tell you, I remember being 11. My son's 11, but I can tell you when I was 11, I couldn't have written a letter like that or been showing up to my local city council meeting. So Isaiah, you're an impressive young man. We're going to schedule a meeting in my office with you and your mom, and we'll have our parks director and our pool director or our community center director there as well, okay? So we'll be in touch with you to set up a meeting. Thank you very much. It was very well stated. Okay, that's all I have in regard to public comment. Yeah, 1977. I cannot imagine. Where was I? I can't even imagine going to my local city council meeting. And Isaiah's actually come and spoken to us on several occasions, and so
I didn't even know what a council meeting was.
I didn't think so. I didn't either. So he's an impressive young man. I mean, he'll be. So anyway, great things are expected. All right. Thank you very much for public comment. Let's now move on to consent agenda. There were 3 items on the consent agenda. I'll go ahead and read them, and council, if you've got an item you want to pull for separate consideration, please let us know. 5A, the minutes for the February 19th, 2019 regular and special meeting minutes. Item B, vouchers, January 2019. Item C, monthly financial report, final December 2018. Council, is there any particular items you want pulled for separate consideration? All right, hearing none, Deputy Mayor Honda, do you have a motion?
Yes, I move to approve items A through C on the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the matters passed unanimously. Now on to council business. Moving on, resolution amending council rules of procedure. We'll have a staff report from Ryan Call, our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council. This is the result of the council retreat and discussions with the Deputy Mayor, as well as some of the notes that staff has made over time, over the last year mostly, about things that need to be fixed in the rules of procedure for the city council, mostly things that either grammar and things like that, or things that are not consistent with current practice, things that we've been doing for a long time that are not in the rules. So I'm going to go over, well, that's what I just said. So I'm going to go over this is basically one slideshow of all of the rules. I'm not going to be going over the housekeeping changes. I did send those to council earlier, and I didn't hear back from anyone as to the more housekeeping measures. So I would encourage council to stop me if there's any particular item that we want to discuss midstream, because we're going to be going from topic to topic. The first item is pretty straightforward. Council has decided that we would like to start these meetings, the regular council meetings, at 6:30 instead of 7. So that is the change that will affect that. Rule 2.2 is being proposed to change these items, and that's to make the agenda in the rules consistent with the agenda that we actually use. We're adding the council committee and regional committee reports after proclamations and presentations. Those are the committee reports that we've been doing for the last few months. Along with that, we'll delete the last sentence of Rule 20.4, which talked about in the past we were to do staff prepared written summaries in lieu of these verbal reports. We're just striking the line that says we're not going to do verbal reports because council's decided that they would like to do that. Adding the deputy mayor report. Council also asked that we add citizen comment to first reading of ordinances. There was a lot of discussion about that at the council retreat, so that change is in this proposed resolution. And the staff has removed reference to ordinances passing on the consent agenda. So long ago, some ordinances that were non-controversial did pass on the consent agenda, but that hasn't been our practice for some time. Rule 6.8 is something that I just changed because it's bugged me for a while, to be honest. The rule for lay on the table that's in council rules is inconsistent with Robert's rules. It says that once something's laid on the table, it can't be brought back in the same meeting, which is completely inconsistent with the meaning and purpose of lay on table, the motion to lay on table. So I basically altered this rule to be consistent with Robert's rules. It's good to follow Robert's rules as much as we can because a lot of times people are coming in and they're familiar with the Robert's rules of order and they haven't necessarily read the very specifics in the council rules, and it's confusing to people when we use terms that are widely known what they mean in a different way. So that's why I've changed this. It doesn't really change what is usually the motion that people really want to use, which is motion to postpone to a certain time. And that's the motion that I encourage people to use to postpone a topic to a future meeting. I would point out the only rule that that is inconsistent with Robert's rules that I left in the rules because it seems to have been the practice here in the city of Federal Way for a very long time and councils are familiar with it. That is, usually Robert's rules lets you amend an amendment to a motion. So you can go too deep. You can make an amendment to a motion, and then you can amend the amendment to the motion, and then you stop. Our rule says you can only go one deep. So you can amend the motion, and then we stop. That's to avoid the confusion of what's the motion on the table, which I think we've all experienced how that can be very confusing. So that just keeps things simple. And you can get to the same end by only going one deep. It just takes a little more time, but it is more clear. So that's not being proposed to change. Rule 6.19 is just something that is inconsistent with our practice, and that is the city clerk usually announce the results of the vote. So I'm just adding the phrase, the mayor or city clerk will announce results of the vote. Rule 3.2 is just to explicitly state what happens if a committee chair is unable or unwilling to participate in agenda setting. So we have, for the last few times this has happened, followed the practice of just having it go to the next person on the list that's in the rules. There's an order that's listed in the agenda rules. We're just writing that down to conform with our past practice. Rule 11.1 is just bringing the definition of immediate family member up to date. It's more inclusive. It includes domestic partners and is just less clumsy than the definition that's in the rules currently. Rule 11.4 for remote participation, this was expressly requested by council, and that is to change the number of people that are allowed to participate remotely at regular council meetings to 3 people instead of 2. And then the limit for how many council members can participate in a committee meeting is set at 2, because we do need somebody in the room. And usually it's 3 people that are in those committees. Rule 16.4 was, I believe, requested by Jerry Lynn. It's just to give guidance to council, because sometimes people are surprised by this. The city's travel and expense reimbursement procedures that the finance department follows limits gratuities to 15%. I know a lot of people are in the habit of, when it's their own money, tipping higher than that, but the city does cap it at 15%. So that is just to put council members on notice of that policy, so they don't have to actually go to the, I don't even know where those other rules are. I think they're in the finance department somewhere. Rule 16.12 adds an exception to first-class air travel for those circumstances when it's necessary to accommodate a medical condition. I don't know of any time we've used that, but it makes sense to me that if someone has a medical need for more room, that the city should provide that. It's a basic accommodation. I think it's something we would probably have approved anyway, but this makes it clear that it's not a violation of the rules. This rule change, 19.14 for advisory bodies. Currently, we have 30 days under our own rules to train new appointees to advisory bodies, but the recent change in the Public Records Act and the OPMA training requirements give us 90 days to do that training, and so we're just making those 2 timelines consistent by making our training within 90 days. And frankly, the 30-day mark has been very hard to meet sometimes, because some of these bodies don't meet very regularly. Rule 19.9 updates the council rules to be consistent with the practice that council's been following for some time in how they interview for appointments to the advisory bodies. The old rules talk about a body that doesn't even exist anymore. So what we did was just outline the current practice, which is the council interviews applicants at a special council meeting. Any council member who attends can vote on what the recommendation to the full body of the council should be. In practice, it seems that usually there's kind of a consensus reached during the interviews, and then there's a vote. But technically, if there was dissent or if there was a disagreement, the body could, or the people that interviewed could make a recommendation. A majority of them could make a recommendation to council before the vote. And then council votes in a regular council meeting on the appointments. Section 20 is a housekeeping cleanup. We added the Lodging Tax and Advisory Committee to the list of council committees. And once again deleted the reference to verbal or written only reports on council committee reports, because we're going to be doing those verbally as well. This is a fairly large change, and I hope council had a time to go through this. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, but the entire policy is in the slideshow. Council expressed a need for a social media policy because right now there's no real guidance on how council members should use social media. So the new policy explains the scope and restrictions of representations made by individual council members online. It does require affirmatively the council members comply with the Public Records Act, and explains how you can do that. And then it does talk a little bit about how to conform with the OPMA, but frankly, it's still largely up to individual council members to take a vote, a tally of how many council members have weighed in on an issue, because it still ultimately comes down to a quorum can't speak on an issue. So there's kind of two sections that we've modified. The first is we've modified the council representation section that's currently in the council rules just to add these two new points, which I think probably should apply to all communications council makes, and that is that the same sense of decorum and professional behavior should be in all forums, whether it's online or in council meetings. Council members should also act that way. Should act that way no matter what forum they're in. And then it's important that council members always make it clear that the views that you express are your own and not necessarily those of the entire city council or the official policy of the city of Federal Way. I also want to point out a lot of these, I think all of these are concepts that we took from the city of Kirkland. Just before the retreat, I asked the facilitator that was the city manager of Kirkland to give us their rules, because they had they'd just done this process, and I really liked how they had handled a lot of these issues. So those are 2 points that came from their rules. And then this section 14.3 is new, and I'm going to go through it a little more closely. Social media posts such as blogs, Facebook, and Twitter may be used by council members to communicate with the public, provided the following guidelines are used, and then there's quite a few here. The first is that council members, in order to comply with the PRA, they have to follow the social media records rules that are detailed later on in the rules. B is very important. Social media shall not be used to conduct city council business other than to informally communicate. Public notices, items of legal or fiscal significance that have not been released to the public, and discussion of quasi-judicial matters may not be included in council media posts. Those are very significant because those all have legal ramifications and can basically make future council action either challengeable or ineffectual, because especially the quasi-judicial matters, if you're getting information from social media that you take into consideration for a site-specific rezone or something like that, that is basically invalidates the action of council later on. We have to make sure all of the information that is going to be considered by council is put on the record. Responses to media posts shall be limited by the provisions of the OPMA, so as not to create an open meeting, or I'm sorry, a public meeting on accident without proper notice. So that's what I mean. Council members still are going to have to keep track of how many council members have weighed in on a post, because there's no automation, there's no way to fix that. It's either don't use social media at all, or keep track of how many people have already piped up. I like D. This was a concept from Kirkland once again. In order to demonstrate openness and willingness to listen to the entire community, council member posts on social media sites should be made through a public-facing page or by marking individual posts available to the public as a whole. So keep everything public. It encourages transparency, and it lets everybody know what council members are being told. Disclaimers are required per another council rule that we'll go over. And if one problem with social media is that it has a short shelf life, let's put it that way. People are really in a hurry to get information out quickly, and that leads to inaccurate information sometimes. And so if a council member later finds out that they base their comment on a faulty premise or bad information, it's on the council member to correct that as much as possible. The last point is kind of optional, but it's a good practice, I think, and that is, if possible, you should restrict comments on posts that you make so that we can avoid OPMA restrictions. That basically helps it so that we don't have other council members responding to a council member on their opinion. It also helps with the Public Records Act. Here are the disclaimers that must be included either by a reference link, which is probably the way, like Twitter, you'd have to do a reference link because you just don't have enough room. And you could put all this boilerplate at the bottom of each post if you wanted to, but a link is sufficient. One is that, once again, as in all expressions made by an individual council member, that you need to make sure that people understand this is your opinion, not necessarily official city policy or the will of all of council. B is to let everybody know why some council members might not be speaking up on an issue. So that is a frustration that sometimes council members have, that 2 people or 3 people get to a topic very quickly, and then that leaves everybody else unable to respond in that forum. And that can be unfair, and this at least explains why that is the case. That you are prohibited by law from chiming in, or you would violate the OPMA. And then the last is a notice to the public that if you do post on these topics, that their comments may become public records. This is the archiving section that explains how we're going to comply with the Public Records Act. So the city purchased, about a year ago now, social media archiving software. So most of the major platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, are supported. And it's pretty simple. You basically let us know, and we'll send a link to you that you need to enroll. And you basically, it's like every other web page or application that uses Facebook to authenticate. Basically, you give permission to this archiver to basically record everything that goes on that account, but we don't get your password or anything like that. So it's a much more streamlined process of opting in. Before, basically we had to call up and ask people for their passwords, which it's nice that we don't have to do that. The link is you just follow the link, you get enrolled, and then it basically does everything in the background, and you never have to see it again until there's a public records request, and then we can access it. For those platforms that are not supported, and the big one that I can think of right now would be those community pages like Nextdoor, things like that. Those are not supported right now. So if you want to post on those pages, the current policy is you need to record it and email it to your email account so that our email archiving software can save it. That was the best we could do under the current technology. So there is some work involved if you use unsupported platforms. Once again, I don't know if comments that are made on all of these are captured, and they are subject to the Public Records Act. The last is a miscellaneous addition, just to say, make it clear that it's okay to use city computers for these purposes. As long as it's not for campaigning, you can use public property that has no financial impact to the city for these purposes. So whether it's personal use, or if it's quasi-official, or if it's straight official, it really doesn't matter because it has no impact on our costs to use the city equipment to do this stuff. So those are the changes. Are there any questions?
Council, any questions? Councilor Tran?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ryan. I do have a question in regard to the first class option.
Yeah.
I wonder why we didn't consider business class instead of first class.
Business class really isn't a thing domestically. A lot of places it's basically first class or you're in the back. So that's a good point. It should be the cheapest available accommodating airfare. So if there is something that will accommodate the medical condition that's cheaper, yeah, you're right, it should be that.
Because the reason I ask, because in my experience, the major difference between the business class and first class, if we're talking about the leg room, the first class usually give you about 37 inches leg room, versus the business class will give you between 32 or 33 inches, depending on the airlines. And the economy, of course, about 29 to 31.
Yeah.
But
it's also how close you are to your neighbor.
Yeah. So in my opinion, the only thing that I can see, benefit in sitting in the first class section is that you get the better meals and alcohol come with it and all that. So I really think that we might, consider business class as one option before we consider the first class.
I think the point is to find the cheapest airfare that actually accommodates the condition. So we could maybe phrase it better to say that it's not a blanket exemption, but the idea is that there's a medical necessity. So first class usually is 2 abreast, which is different than 3 abreast in the middle of an airplane. So it's hard to say. I don't know what condition requires more room versus another. Like I said, this hasn't come up yet, but it was an idea that was requested. So if council wants to tweak it, that's fine.
When I was in my employment and I was flying on business, I would fly first class. I would charge the agency for a regular seat, not first class. I would pay the difference. I would upgrade. Then a lot of people started learning that you could upgrade. So then I just bought the first class ticket, but I still only charged my agency what you would pay, as I call, in steerage.
All right, Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, I mean, just to respond to Councilmember Tran, I think, because we're looking to pass this tonight, correct?
Yeah.
And so I would favor an amendment to modify that, to say just what your recommendation was, or something
I
that's...
actually would prefer to, if council wants to modify this resolution, there's no time constraints. I'd prefer to take that direction from council and come back with a resolution that actually is what you want.
Okay, so I would favor that option, that we move forward on that, because I think it's a good point, and I think it's a fair point, and this is taxpayer money, so we have to be really frugal, but at the same time have to meet the needs, medical needs of council members or city staff.
And to be clear, this is just for council.
Oh, okay.
This does not apply to staff.
All right. Yep. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor, do you have a motion?
Yes. I move approval of the proposed resolution amending the City Council Rules of Procedure.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Moore?
So just for a point of clarification, if we're talking about modifying that segment, shouldn't we take that out or pass it with this?
Is there a proposed amendment?
I believe, if I may, that the city attorney just said that he would come back with something later.
Right, but your motion is to pass this as it was stated.
Yes.
So that means your motion would mean we'd pass it with the concern.
Correct.
So maybe we, if I may, Mayor, make a proposed motion.
Well, there's a motion.
There's a motion
so
on
do you have
the
an
floor.
amendment to the motion?
That's what I meant. An amendment to the motion.
Okay.
That we pass the council rules with the exception of, what rule is that, council rule?
It is Council Rule 16.12, first class air travel.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right. Is there a second for that amendment?
What's the language you're proposing?
Just that.
Would you please clarify the motion?
Yeah. So the motion would be
The
to,
amendment.
the amendment to the motion would be to pass the council rules with the exception of Council Rule 16.12.
12.
Thank you.
So taking out the section.
To strike the section
Just
16 point.
taking it out right now, which right now, the proposal is to prohibit first-class air travel. So this would take that out. And is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
Second.
Okay, there's a second to that, and I think the stated purpose is to have another look at it or have it come back. Councilmember Safadossin, you had your light on previously.
I think it's already stated, but my comment was, I don't think we're saying first class, but not every trip has a business class. It goes direct, first class, and then you're into coach. So I just want to make sure that we're not asking for, that we want to be in first class for the food or whatever. I think there's a need for some of us, so I just want that to be clear. And personally, it's not about being in first class, it's just being somewhere where we're comfortable. So I don't think I don't want us to be focusing on the semantics. It's just to better accommodate.
Right. Okay, Councilmember Tran?
Thank you, Mayor. If I may respond to that, my own personal experience is that most of airlines do have business class nowadays. I have traveled and I rack up about 200,000 miles already. So I'm very confident that most of the airlines do have, basic economy and, business class and first class. So my only concern is that if we tie ourselves into this first class language, then we pretty much obligated to, pay a high price when, one of us have to travel. I just try to save the money. That's what I'm trying to do here.
Well, this the current rule prohibits any first class travel.
Right, but at the same time, I would like to accommodate the people, the person that need the extra space, but I don't want us to lock ourselves into this first class language. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Councilmember Moore and then Councilmember Duclos.
Yeah, and I think this is a good conversation, obviously really important, and I appreciate what Councilmember Safadossin is saying, and that's, I think it's good that we're going to give the 2-week period time for Ryan to come up with a solution that meets both expectations, and
I'm sorry, what is the 2-week period?
or until next time, until you come back to the council next time.
Okay.
For the resolution, correct? So that may be the next council meeting.
It'd be a separate resolution on this topic.
Exactly, next time around, whatever that means, whatever the mayor has authorized.
Well, whenever we're back on the issue. Okay, Councilmember Duclos? Okay. And I'm sorry, the Deputy Mayor, I didn't see that she had her microphone on. Deputy Mayor?
So I didn't request this, but I can understand it being disabled. It is difficult to fly on an airplane. It's difficult to use crutches and try to get on an airplane, and difficult to find a place to put your crutches on an airplane. So I can completely understand this. I don't think that it is something that would be used very often. So I'm not sure that it would be a major issue. And I would suggest that we find some language that would somehow accommodate those who need additional space because of a disability or whatever. Until you are there, you don't know how very difficult it is to be in a small enclosed place trying to navigate using crutches, and I hope you never have to find out.
I have been there once. Unfortunately, I sat in 3 rows, 3 seats across in the back end, and there was a very obese woman that came and sat beside me and took up 2 of those seats, and I was squeezed over by that. So I can understand that sometimes there might be exceptions made for people that have some kind of disability, or if they've broken something or whatever. So I think we ought to have a little bit of flexibility.
May I?
Yes.
Ryan, are you following what we're saying?
I am.
Do you think you could come up with language that could accommodate what we're trying to say?
Very easily.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So
And
there.
Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to add, I did not request this either, so But it's a good addition.
It might have been a
to
helpful
have.
staff member. I'm not sure where it came from, to be
And
honest.
I'm not complaining because I'm one of those who does need it, but I just want to make that clear that I'm not fighting for. I just think it's important, and
Okay.
for the record.
Okay, there's been a motion, a second on the amendment, which is to essentially eliminate, at least for now, the section that has to do with first-class travel. And all those in favor, Isaiah, all those, and Cynthia, all those in favor of the motion to move forward next with the vote with the taking out the first-class travel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now, as to the main motion, is there any more discussion as to the passing of these items in regard to council rules of procedure? Deputy Mayor?
I would like to thank Ryan for his work on this. We've been discussing changing these rules now for quite some time. And thank you for taking the time to go through them and to meet with me about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any discussion? Any other discussion? All right, there's been a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the matter passes as amended. Okay, and now item C, item B, resolution amending City of Federal Way Code of Ethics. First, a staff report by Ryan.
Thank you. So there are two proposed changes to the Federal Way Code of Ethics. They're both meant to clarify kind of what our practice has been in the past. The first is we've always had an exception to the gift policy that says that things of minimal value are not considered gifts, but there's never been a dollar amount. And I've had the question asked me, I don't know how many times, how much is minimal? And I've always said there's no number in the code, but you know, the feds say 20 per instance, 50 per year per source. The state, I think, says $50 a year. They're a little, I think they just say $50 a year, and they don't care how many times the transactions happen. So what I heard at the retreat was that council was interested in adopting the federal standard, which is minimum value shall be defined as gifts that do not exceed $20 per occasion or $50 from a single source in a given calendar year. So that is the change that is before council today. In addition, this is not something the council asked for, but it is a question that I have been asked many times by council members, and that is it accepting a gift to take funding to attend like an educational forum or a conference that's related to my role as a council member? And our advice has always been no, that it's that if it's related to your professional capacity, that it's okay. But it's been unclear in the rules. So this language is adopted directly from the state. This is the rules that the state bodies all operate under, and I think it is appropriate to adopt it here as well. So basically, it makes it clear that if you are accepting payment to pay for course fees, enrollment, travel, lodging, and per diem to attend an official conference related to your job as a council member, that is not considered a gift. So those are the two changes under the gift section. The last section relates to remote interests. And this section in our rules has always been basically what happened, and I don't know what the thought was leading to this, but I think that people were trying to make our rules easier to read than the state statute. So they basically paraphrased the state statute, which is RCW 422310, about remote interests, and we're trying to make it easier to read and understand. But I think some of the what to do if you have a remote interest was lost in translation. So council asked for just very clear direction on what to do if you have a remote interest. So the last line here is I think the easiest way to avoid confusion and conflicts, and that is the official will recuse themselves if they have a remote interest. And then I broke out what I think is the most important part, which was kind of buried in a subsection in the rules, and that is if you do have a remote interest, even if you're not voting, even if under the state statute, you can still vote, but you can't try to influence other city officials to spend money on the entity that you have a remote interest in. So I broke that out so it's a separate paragraph and it's very easy to see. So those are the two changes, our remote interest to avoid confusion. Are there any questions?
Council? Councilmember Kopang.
On 4.3, you say this shall be accomplished by the elected official recusing his or herself from the vote.
Yes.
I think it could be just themselves, but
fair enough.
I think, and that's
it's a grammar thing.
And I know, but but I think the other part of it is the discussion as well.
Yeah.
I think when you are recusing yourself, you should actually remove yourself from discussion as well.
Well, and that's what the next paragraph is.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Trying to influence others.
Okay. All right.
And that's always been what's in the rules. It's just it wasn't broken out and it wasn't quite as clear. The recusal is actually not required by state law. That would be a rule that you are imposing upon yourselves, but I think it's easier and clearer. Basically, I think the rule is meant for large bodies where you have a lot of people in the room and maybe you don't want to take the time to go through each one, and the idea is that the vote should pass without counting the remote interested parties. But it's just, if we have to figure out who has remote interest and we're not counting their vote anyway, why not just recuse yourself? It just makes it easier.
All right, Council, any other questions? Deputy Mayor Honda.
I'd like to once again thank you. When I was doing some research on this remote interest and recusing oneself, there's a lot of stuff out there. If you ever have a few hours that you want to read about it, it's very interesting to read what other jurisdictions have done, and some are very they have nothing, and some are very strict, and it's very, very interesting. So I found it fascinating, and you all might find it fascinating too.
All right. Deputy Mayor, do you have a motion?
I move approval of the proposed resolution amending the Code of Ethics.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, now, purchase of new storage area network, or SAN, and backup software. First of all, a staff report from Thomas Fitchner, our IT manager, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. All right. I'll try and make this brief. I do have a few slides, as you can see in front of you, but we'll try and move through as quickly as we can. So before you is the new SAN and backup software. So let's start off real quick. What is a SAN? It is a storage area network, and as shown in the diagram below, it's pretty much that side of a network. It is a dedicated, more secure network that connects the servers to the hard drives that actually store the data, the video, the pictures, emails, etc. So currently in production on the left side of the screen, we purchased it in 2012. It has a total capacity of 98.4 terabytes, which is a lot, but not necessarily, for us it's a lot, but for big data centers it's minuscule at best. We're about 73% used. On the right-hand side of the screen, we bought that one in 2005. It is still in production, but we use it for backup. So we back up some things from the one on the left to the one on the right. As you can see, it's about the same size, but you can see the capacity difference. 16.8 terabytes in 2005 to 98 in 2012. So why are we going to replace this? And it's not necessarily capacity. We're not bursting at the seams at this point, but the current SAN has reached its capital replacement life cycle of 7 years. But the biggest issue is performance. We are having a challenge right now actually making sure that our systems can run fast enough for what we need them to do and to expand to new systems. So that's the biggest, and that's why it's bolded on the screen. In addition, our current SAN that is production, the one that was on the left, it is end of life in 2015 and end of support just around the corner in 2020. We have issues with slow backups and then recovery, and we have limited ability to grow to new services such as the electronic plan review. I'm waiting for this system, which is why I'm before you tonight, so I can actually build that system so that we can start accepting, sending, and receiving plans for the public for new plan review. And finally, security risk. You may have heard in the news some Amish had a big ransomware issue. Shut them down for a few days as they recovered. In fact, they sent out an email asking all of the neighboring IT departments for help to go up and actually re-image every single computer on their network. Now, this won't fix that, but it will actually help our critical data such as email, file storage, all that stuff. This new technology will have the ability to recover faster. So the proposed purchase is actually much smaller than what we have today. It is a HP Enterprise Nimble HF40. It's a hybrid SAN. It's total capacity of 126 terabytes. And the reason it's a hybrid is because it uses traditional hard drives that are spinning and slower, coupled with ultra-fast flash memory that helps it have that performance. So it's the kind of the best bang for buck. So why? Because it's a cost-effective solution. It balances that performance with capacity. There are way more expensive solutions out there, and there are cheaper ones out there. We could get a new version of what we have, but it still wouldn't solve the performance problem. We can't afford an all-flash model, so this is a good middle ground for us. It includes features such as deduplication, compression, encryption, and snapshots, and I've included a few cool graphics to kind of illustrate that. Deduplication, as you can see, there's 3 A's and it goes to 1 A. So if I have 3 different copies of a file, I only store 1. So that's what deduplication means. Compression, just kind of as it is, it's got a little vice clamp and it's trying to really squeeze that data out there. Compression's been around for a while, but this does it natively. And finally, encryption is CJIS compliant. It helps us be more CJIS compliant, which is Criminal Justice Information Systems, what we have to be for housing police data. And finally, the Nimble also has a feature that not many people do, or not many product offerings do, and that's real-time monitoring. It's included with our maintenance. So as long as we pay maintenance on the device, they're actually proactively monitoring it in real time. They call us when there's a problem versus us looking for a orange or red flashy light on it and calling them for help. So it really, with the amount of staff that we do not have, this helps us be a little bit more proactive when it comes to this. Coupled with the SAN, where we store our data, we got to back it up somehow. And we've used an aging software called ArcServe for years, and it is definitely showing its age substantially. Veeam is kind of the new kid on the block. They've been around for several years now. It is kind of industry standard. We'll be buying the backup and replication Enterprise Plus version of it. It integrates, a cool feature of that is it integrates right into the hardware, into that Nimble box that you saw. And when it takes a snapshot of data, we can actually recover straight from that. Way faster, way better. We don't even have to go to a backup disk or a tape. It also works with a disk-to-disk backup strategy, which we're going to continue doing. We're going to keep our old SAN. If parts fail, we can get them kind of on the gray market, secondhand, but it would be used as a backup, not our production. And then that'll help for speed of backups and recovery. And also it helps boost our ability to respond to disaster recovery. If there's a problem, we can, and that was one of the things that came out with FEMA. Now granted, we don't have another site. We're not backing up to another data center on the east side of the mountains or anything, but at least it helps equipment fault tolerance here. So at the end of the day, the cost of the system is expensive. Total is $177,053.83. All of this hardware and software will be purchased off the NASBO Value Point Master Agreement, which the state of Washington is a participating member, and we can buy off of that. The budget is a little bit different. Now, that SAN that we have that we bought was nowhere near the cost of this back when we bought it. And we could buy another one for about the same cost, but we get the same problems. Yeah, we get a little bit more capacity, but we get the same performance. We need to step up to that next level. And so as you can see, I've got our capital reserves, I've got our backup software replacement, and miscellaneous hardware budget that I've budgeted this year. In addition, I've coupled it with some operating money and the generosity of CD, police, and public works. So I want to thank Director Davis, Police Chief Long, and Director E.J. Walsh for helping us out, because without their support, we couldn't do that. So they're providing the money out of their operations to help make this happen. There is an ongoing cost issue that I will have to figure out. I've got a plan, but Veeam, the backup software, is the one that we have to pay that maintenance on. It's substantially more expensive than what we're currently paying, and so I will find that $4,700. We have to. This is the software to get, so I've got to make it work. The Mayor's recommendation is to authorize the purchase of the sand and backup software from Tech Power Solutions for a total not to exceed $177,053.83. So, with that, any questions?
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. It was Sammamish, right? Suffered
Yes.
from ransomware?
Well, that's the latest
Yeah.
locally, but there's
Locally.
lots
Yeah.
that are.
What did that cost that city overall to recover from that?
So I haven't heard of the total cost of that, but if you remember Atlanta, that was the one that's actually about $12 million to recover from that. But they're a much larger city.
Right.
But they had to, not only was it about $2.5 million for professional services to get people in there to recover, but then the additional money was to basically replace systems and upgrade systems that were aging and failing. So the current, if you look it up about Atlanta, is about $12.5 million.
Gosh.
Wow. So did that, I remember the morning when that hit the news, did that, it impacted the entire city, but what about their police department?
It bagged everybody. I mean, the only thing that
were they
didn't
not
go
able
down,
to work?
there was 911, I believe, was still active. There was like 3 or 4 core functions that were still active, but the day-to-day functions, email down, file storage down, a lot of stuff. So you'd have a ton of people, just their office workers, that would just be sitting there doing nothing, staring at a blank screen.
Wow.
So it was substantial. That was a big hit. And Sammamish was, they actually had to, like I said, re-image every single computer. And they needed help. They have one guy up there. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was a big blow to them.
Wow. Councilor Copang.
Hey, Thomas, can you explain why we wouldn't use the cloud as a
That's a good question. I was going to put a portion of that in this presentation to kind of address that. And in lack of saving time, I excluded it. It's likely that this might be the last sand. I don't want to go on record saying that it is the last sand that we would buy, but it is likely that it is. It could be. And there's 2 reasons for that. Number one is the cloud. There's a lot of cities around us that are putting a lot of data to the cloud. And when I say I'm not, they look at me with this weird look on their face, thinking like, what are you doing? Like, that's where you need to put your stuff. The problem with that is it comes at a guaranteed operational cost. Like, you need to start paying the service providers X amount of money every year, and you're on the hook now because they got your data. And when you pull it back out, where are you going to put it? Because you don't have any equipment to do that. So then you'll have to buy some more equipment. But there are, things are getting cheaper, things are getting better. But having our data here in this building in a secure room downstairs that's directly connected to our network, it's fast, and there's a lot of elements and environment that I can control. Now, I have a small team. I don't have a ton of systems guys. So when that has a problem downstairs, I need, it's harder for me to react to that. And that's why I try to choose solutions that help better. But where the cloud has some challenges is it's not perfect. There have been outages. Amazon, Microsoft Azure, Google, they've all had their outages, and some big, some for the majority of a day. Not to mention, if our single internet connection, somebody cuts a piece of fiber because they think it's a piece of copper, or I think a lawnmower mowed over one of Comcast's box and actually took out some of the fire department stations, that is an issue as well. So then now we're waiting for that to get repaired before we can access our data. Here, it's here. So there's a couple different schools of thought. the cloud is a bigger topic, a bigger discussion, not just data, but more servers and everything else. And I'm looking at that where it fits our city and what we need. So, yeah, we will be going there more so.
Councilor Duclos?
I just want some clarification here, because I'm looking here at your report, and you're saying $177,100.
Yes.
And on the motion I'm supposed to make, it's $177,000, 53.83 cents. Should I just round that up to the? Well,
Let's do the actual,
is that the actual 177,053?
053.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Please, thank you.
Just wanted to make sure we got it correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councilor Tran.
Thank you, Mayor. Thomas, thank you for your presentation. I just have a quick two questions. One is you mentioned this Nimble system. They have the ultra-fast flash memory. Are you referring to the SSD drive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I want to ask is, I'm sure they come with warranty, right?
So this one, if you, in this I pared down a lot of stuff, but if you look at your packet, you'll see the actual quote, and I can throw that on here. I didn't see the lights, so.
We haven't used that in how many years now?
Yeah. There we go. We'll zoom in on this guy. Sorry about that. So,
Good
the
Lord.
actual quote comes out, and you can see this spot right up here. And Brian's going to hate me for walking off camera, but it does have 5 years of support included in it. And so we need 7 years out of the equipment, and I've been very upfront with them. And so we will in 5 years have to buy a maintenance contract for it, but that'll be at a fraction of the cost. But one of the cool things is I've talked to a lot of people, and these systems are still running even further, and they're like, you know, performance is good. We're here for capacity, and that's where I'd like to be. I'd like it to be fast. And Nimble stands behind their product, and they're actually creating ways that you don't need to buy a whole new box. You can buy maybe a new controller if you need to, or upgrade the drives, or this is expandable. So you can add another box underneath it, and it ties together and makes it bigger. So it's covered for 5 years, and then we'll need to look at that. And obviously, it's a little bit more expensive because it's an older piece of equipment, but that'll be a fraction of this cost, a very small fraction.
Thank you.
All right, Deputy Mayor Honda, do you have a motion?
No, I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Duclos.
Are you sure you don't want to do it?
Exactly.
I move to authorize the purchase of the SAN and backup software from Tech Power Solution for amount not to exceed $177,053.83.
Second.
All right, it's been a motion and a second, a very specific, detailed motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter passed unanimously. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Department of Commerce funding and family shelter contracts. First, we'll have a staff report from Sarah Bridgeford, our CDBG coordinator. And Jeff Watson, our Human Services Manager, is present as well if there are any other questions. All right, Sarah, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the Council. This evening, I will be presenting a set of options for your consideration for the Department of Commerce funding for family shelter. We are also joined by representatives from both MSC and Fusion, in case there are any questions or follow-up. The Washington State Legislature provided $100,000 for emergency shelter for families with children. Initially, a contract with Nary's Place was proposed to provide immediate shelter options. Based on new information provided in January, Nary's Place withdrew and City Council allocated funds for hotel-motel stays with services and pre-development costs. Both of these uses of funds address needs in the community. For instance, Mary's Place reports that in the first 2 quarters of 2018, 54 families called in from Federal Way. St. Vincent de Paul also reported that 80 families experiencing homelessness in 2018 called in for hotel no-tell vouchers or other services. So the need is there for both immediate and infrastructure development. The initial allocation included $40,000 for pre-development and $60,000 for hotel no-tell vouchers with services. Staff published notice of the funding available and implemented a competitive process for the awarding of funding. At the February 5th meeting, Council reallocated the funds for $60,000 for pre-development and $40,000 for hotel no-tell vouchers with services. The city used a competitive process following the council's initial allocation and then updated applicants as to the change in allocation during the second phase of the process. The letter of interest was due on January 25th. The applications were then emailed out to applicants and due on February 13th. The Human Services Commission reviewed the applications, discussed the applications and the recommendations at the February 25th meeting, and then made a recommendation that we'll present this evening. To allow the funded agencies as much time as possible to access the funding, we are bypassing the Parks, Recreation, Human Services, and Public Safety Committee with Mayor Farrell and Councilmember Johnson's approval. It was a staff mistake in not taking the opportunity to go to FEDRAC. Just forgot with the timing and all the other work, and we made a mistake in not using that opportunity to present the recommendations, even though the packet materials would not have been ready. So we apologize for that. 4 letters of interest were received to provide immediate shelter with services for families experiencing homelessness. 3 of the projects were eligible, and ultimately 2 decided to submit applications, with the 3rd electing to make referrals to whoever receives the funding. 1 agency submitted an LOI and an application for pre-development costs associated with establishing a family shelter in Federal Way. The Human Services Commission discussed and made funding recommendations at the February 25th Commission meeting. The discussion concluded supporting Multi-Service Center for the provision of immediate shelter options with services. And then the commissioners supported Fusion for pre-development costs. However, the discussion included that the $20,000 included in the application for the executive director's time represented 35 hours per week, and that as presented in the application did not all qualify as pre-development, and that all the deliverables identified in the application were not pre-development for the executive director's time. Based on the information submitted in the application, the Human Services Commission voted 7-0 with 2 recusals to recommend City Council provide $40,000 to Fusion for pre-development. The performance measure would need to complete a feasibility study, including the planned rehabilitation of the Econo Lodge property, appraisal, engineering study, and architectural study. The Human Services Commission voted 8-0 with 1 recusal to recommend City Council provide $60,000 to the Multi-Service Center for hotel no-tell stays with services. For $60,000, the Multi-Service Center would provide at minimum 565 hotel shelter nights for 15 households from Federal Way and 60 service support contacts. The $60,000 includes $10,500 for flexible support funding to help families either remove barriers to housing or get into more stable housing. While the recommendation of the Human Services Commission does not follow the February 5th reallocation, the Commission felt that as presented in the application, the $20,000 for Fusion's executive director did not meet the intent of the funding and did not qualify as pre-development. Staff are providing 2 alternate options that do follow the February 5th reallocation of funds. Both address the inclusion of the executive director's time and whether or not it is pre-development and how to work with that. Option 2 is one of the alternates. For $60,000, Fusion, again, would have a performance measure of completing a feasibility study. It includes a total of $51,000. $40,000 would be for professional services to do that, and then $11,000 for the executive director's role in the pre-development. As is our standard, we would require backup of the time allocation and activities completed by the executive director. That option also includes $9,000 in admin or indirect. That would be at the 15% cap that would be standard for the Department of Commerce. They go no higher for any of their funding sources. And it would be within the limits of the city's practice. Option 2 includes providing $40,000 to the Multi-Service Center for hotel-motel stays with services. The contracted performance measures would be a prorated version of the $60,000 contract option. And that would be, at minimum, 10 households would be served with a total of 375 hotel nights at minimum and 40 support contacts. The contract does include $7,000 for that assistance in removing barriers and getting into more stable housing options. And then our third option for council this evening is, again, $60,000 for Fusion, but it would include $20,000 for admin or indirect. This would alleviate the need for tracking time. Typically, executive director's time is considered more of an admin indirect. Occasionally, executive directors will allocate time directly to contracts, but this would alleviate that need. It does, however, go above the Washington State Department of Commerce 15% admin cap and would be outside the limits of the city's standard practice. The multi-service center contract and performance measures are the same for option 2 and 3. And while I don't have it on the screen, our option 4 is to take no action and provide additional guidance to staff. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Sepa Dawson.
Yeah, with the multi-service center, my question is, are the motels, have they been identified and are they within our city limits?
Actually, Sarah?
I do not have that direct answer. I know that the intent was to try to have as many hotels on board in Federal Way and then use outside hotels as necessary. Robin, is that still accurate? Yes. Yes. So just to confirm that.
Could you, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Could you say what she just said?
Yes.
We'll try to, for purposes of the
Yes.
record, to make sure everybody hears it.
I was going to do that. Robin just indicated that that is the case, that they do have some hotels that they've worked with, and then they do have some that are outside of the city of Federal Way as well.
All right. Lydia?
Okay, so one of the concerns was the intent of the funding was that it be used within the city limits. So does that prohibit that from happening? And then back to the 40,000, this time frame, are we going to be able to use all 40,000?
I would say that based on the data, well, I'll start with the prohibiting. I don't think that it does, as long as the first stop is a Federal Way hotel. As we know, if hotels are full, and we have a family that is in need, I don't think that the intent would be to not serve them. And then as far as the ability to spend the funds, if we think about the numbers from St. Vincent de Paul and Mary's Place and the school district, we're looking at 20 to 27 families per quarter calling in for emergency shelter options. And those are just the ones that we know of. So if that's the case in either the $40,000 or $60,000 options of the contract, the number of families proposed is within that, so we would probably be able to have enough families access that to fully spend the grant.
All right. Deputy Mayor Honda, Councilmember Moore, and then Councilmember Duclos, your microphone is on. Did you wish to make a comment?
No.
Okay. First, the Deputy Mayor.
I'll let
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for all of your endeavors and patience and due diligence in coming up with solutions, ideas, and yes. And so this certainly has been an ongoing conversation, and we're back at the table here. And I guess I'm interested in I'm interested in discussion with option 3. That's the PowerPoint. 3 option for council action, that one. I wanted you to kind of talk through it, because I feel like 1 minute you say that for the Department of Commerce, we can't use it for staffing. But then here, you're saying that, okay, we could do as an option, give 60,000 for fusion, and it would include 9,000 in admin, which is in line with the 10 to 15% cap with the Department of Commerce. Can you talk through that, and just because I want to make sure I'm clear-headed on that?
And Sarah, while you do that, can you please pull that up on the screen so everybody can have it? Thank you.
And you were talking about both options 2 and 3 and talking more through the difference between them. So option 2 includes $9,000 for admin and up to $11,000 for the executive director. And then option 3 is $20,000 for admin, so to be used for any purpose. It's not necessarily for staffing. And option 2, some of the deliverables for the executive director's time were pre-development, which is why option 2 is on the table, that it would require the tracking of time and allocation to the grant. Provided that documentation is adequate, then that reimbursement would be made. If there were questions on the deliverables for that time, a prorated payment could be made. For option and is just an admin that covers admin and indirect costs associated.
But that would be inconsistent with the policies of how we can use this.
It would be inconsistent, but the Department of Commerce did say that they would allow it. They would not recommend it.
So if they would allow it but not recommend it. Okay.
Council, any other comments or questions? Motion? Councilmember Duclos?
I move approval of the Department of Commerce grant agreement effective February 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2019 to receive up to $100,000 for emergency family shelter, and move approval of option 1 and associated contracts.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for option 1. And could we go back up to option 1?
Yes.
Just for everybody's clarification? Okay.
That would go to the recommendation. The Human Service Commission has authorized the mayor to enter into agreements with the Washington State Department of Commerce for receipt and use of the grant funds, Fusion for $40,000 for pre-development acquisition cost, and Multi-Service Center for $60,000 for hotel motel stays with services.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Tran.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you already said it, but I just want to make sure that that I heard correctly. You said that with the $60,000 go to multi-service center, with the number of call for service right now, you are thinking that we should be able to meet this, to spend the money by the deadline. Am I correct on that?
I think that there are enough families who are in need of service that the funds could be spent. And the effort would then be around making sure that families know that this exists and getting referrals into multi-service center.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Johnson?
No, I was going to ask the same question, just how confident we were that we could do that, but it sounds like we're pretty confident. So.
Well,
And the Human Service Commission did go through this, and this is actually their recommendation.
That's right. You know what? I'm sorry. I passed over the Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor Honda, okay. And then Councilmember Moore.
So will MSC only serve Federal Way families?
Yes, MSC would use a method of screening to ask families where they're from. As you know, with families who are experiencing homelessness, they don't have an address to go back to, so there are some industry standards that they're using to do that. Yes.
And they would first try to get them into a Federal Way hotel motel?
Yes.
So it looks like they would put a family into a hotel for 37 days or so if you took the 15 households with the 565 hotel shelter nights. And I'm wondering if Mary's Place had room, would it not be better for a family to be at Mary's Place?
I think that is actually part of the service that the multi-service center would be providing in their support contacts, that this would be a situation where another shelter is not available. So then the family would be able to access a hotel-motel stay, and it does not preclude them from going into shelter or other services, and multi-service center would be working with them on accessing longer-term options, whether that is a shelter or permanent housing.
So when you talk about removing barriers, that MSC, what are the barriers and how would they be removed?
Sure. Well, barriers are unique to any family. That could be something as simple as working on transportation needs to get into work. It could be paying down an eviction or a bill that's precluding them from getting their own lease. It could be part of the move-in cost. So any number of things. The Department of Commerce has a fair amount of flexibility. There are some kind of pre-approved categories, so to speak, and then if something comes up, it just takes us working with Multi-Service Center and the Department of Commerce to get unique situations approved. So it could really be a variety of things. It might be a medical need, any number of barriers that they can address.
Can you go back to when you said that the Department of Commerce, I can't remember exactly, they recommended, they would allow but did not recommend. Can you explain what that exactly means?
Well, that means that while they have drafted a contract and they would allow it, it would be against their standard policy. So they're allowing it, they would not recommend it, they would prefer a different option.
But it would be covered. It would be allowed to be covered.
It would be.
Okay. What I would say is when I originally requested the $100,000, it was for creating a shelter here in Federal Way, and we are now in the process of doing that. Whereas we want families sheltered, and that's important to get them out of the cold. If this were to pass tonight, I certainly hope that there is enough money that Fusion can do the development things that they need to do to get that shelter open, because in the long run, that's going to provide many more families with shelter for many, many years to come, and would be ultimately better than providing something very short-term. Thank you.
Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. We are truly blessed to have phenomenal organizations, as we recognized their volunteers earlier. The Multi-Service Center is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I know the CEO is sitting right here, a former CEO and a current CEO, certainly it's an important organization. They provide a very important part of solving this crisis, and that's really important. But I think for me, while I value that work very much, I keep thinking about the permanent solution. What is that? And I respect the recommendation of option one. I think it's fair. But I'm looking at option two because it's in line with the Department of Commerce. It takes staff time to put in the effort and the time and the energy to walk towards a gigantic completion that Fusion has been working on. And again, I'd be remiss if I just did not acknowledge my thoughts on this, and that's the fact that Fusion is providing a permanent, long-term solution.
Not necessary.
Yes, necessary. They're in the midst of opening up a hotel. They're still negotiating, if I'm not mistaken, and that is a permanent solution. I don't know what else can be permanent other than that. And so, while I respect option one, as my colleagues vote for option one, that certainly is a good choice. But I think option 2 addresses what's at least important to me, and I'm only speaking for myself, which is we've got to walk towards a permanent solution. And I want to make sure that I'm doing what I can to support that effort. That's not to say that even if we did option 2, we can still support the multi-service center and the valuable work that they do in the right now. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on it, and I will most likely be voting no on option 1 for that purpose. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to go, as a person who has led a social service agency and been through, it's damn cold outside there. And we need to get people into housing now off the streets. And we can do a longer-term thing. There are other ways to get money to buy the hotel and get people into there. Instead of spending how much that I saw in their thing, they were spending a heck of a lot of money for administration and less going into putting people into shelter. It's cold out there right now. It's colder now than it was in December and January, and I don't see it letting up yet. And until there's another plan coming forward, I think the best use of the money is go to the multi-service center, who has been doing this already for years, and they know what they're doing, and they can put a number of families in housing now.
Councilor Kopeng, then the Deputy Mayor.
I'd just like to call the question.
The question has been called. Is there a second to call the question?
Second.
All right. There's been a motion and a second to call the question. There has been a motion and a second and a discussion regarding for passages of option 1 as recommended by the Human Services Commission. All those in favor of option 1?
Aye.
Mayor, I'm sorry. We need to vote on the motion to call a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Nay.
Councilmember Safa-Dawson?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Tran?
Nay.
Councilmember Kopeng?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Nay.
Councilmember Duclos?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-3.
All right. Now, as to the main motion, the option 1, as recommended by the Human Services Commission. All those in favor of the main motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Nay.
Councilmember Safa-Dawson?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Tran?
Aye.
Councilmember Kopeng?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Nay.
Councilmember Duclos?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-2.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. All right, now moving on to item E, resolution, section 108, loan conversion from interim to permanent. First, we'll have a staff report from Jeff Watson, our Community Services Manager. Jeff?
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. The item before you is, what's going on here? There we go. There it is. Is a policy question. Should City Council authorize the city to participate with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in a public offering to convert the Section 108 interim variable rate loan to a long-term fixed rate 20-year bond status? The city received a loan from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in 2016 in the amount of $3,030,000. The loan was part of the financing package for the Performing Arts and Events Center. The loan is being repaid with funds from the annual CDBG grant. To date, the city has repaid $318,000 in principal and just a little less than $130,000 in interest. The current source of the loan from HUD is considered an interim loan with a variable interest rate, and that's the way it was established when the loan closed. The variable interest rate is not intended to be permanent or a long-term financing source. The variable interest rate really is made to ensure that borrowers have immediate access to funding for approved projects prior to HUD doing public offerings. And HUD expects most communities to lock in permanent fixed rate financing at the earliest opportunity to reduce risk. On or about March 28, 2019, HUD will convert interim Section 108 loans, this is actually throughout the country, to long-term loans via a public offering. The city has the opportunity to lock in fixed interest rates for the remainder of the term of the loan which will run through 2035. We need to provide notification to HUD by Monday, March 11th, 2019, whether the city will in fact be participating. The benefits of the conversion: it eliminates uncertainty. Right now, the city has a variable rate loan. Basically, the interest rate that we're subject to essentially changes every day. It permits accurate budgeting of the principal and interest rates as we go forward. The interest rates for interim financing have increased more than 50% over the last year, and long-term interest rates have also increased but continue to be at historic lows. The variable rate currently is the LIBOR 90-day rate plus 20 basis points, which as of yesterday was 2.61%. The estimated interest rate payment amounts run from, excuse me, approximately $228,000 beginning in 2019, down through $165,000 being the last payment in 2035. These estimates shown on this table are just that. The actual interest rates will be determined when the public offering takes place and investors purchase the bonds and establish the interest rates that will actually be paid. The current note balance for the city is $2,712,000. The principal and interest payments have and will continue to be paid from the city's CDBG annual grant. Other conditions associated with it: there are issuance costs that are approximately 0.5% of the note balance, so about $13,560 will be paid using CDBG funds. The note will not be prepayable for the first 10 years, but it may be defeased at any time. Payments will be made semi-annually rather than quarterly as they are now. Just a comparison between the conversions. I know this is a little small, so basically the distinctions between the variable rate and the fixed rate note change. As I said, there'll be quarterly payments. We have quarterly payments under the variable rate. There'll be biannual payments under a fixed rate loan. We're still required to create jobs in either scenario. We still are required to meet a national objective under either scenario. The job creation and national objective limitation on CDBG use would be the same. We've had conversations, or communication I should say, with HUD over the last week since the City Council committee meeting, and questions were brought up about the use of CDBG funds. The communication we have had from HUD is that in general we will be able to, as long as we are diligently pursuing the creation of jobs and pursuing the national objective, we will continue to be able to use CDBG funds. At some point, it certainly is possible that if we fail to create the jobs, and the scenario that we're talking about is one in which the hotel that was proposed as a part of the application and is expected to be built adjacent to the Performing Arts and Events Center, if it does not go forward and jobs are not created through the development of the hotel, at some point HUD is going to come to us and it's going to say, look, you're going to have to make some changes, and a possibility is certainly that they could encourage us to not use CDBG funds. However, under the regulations, CDBG funds are allowable to be used for the repayment. However, they could instigate other kinds of requirements about how we keep track of the creation of any other kinds of jobs. Additionally, the variable rate loan, if we choose not to participate in the public offering, two things will happen. One, we will have to begin to pay a quarterly loan fee of $100 in addition to our interest and principal payments that we're paying. Additionally, at some point, HUD will force the city into a public offering and into a permanent loan situation under circumstances that may be less attractive than they are now. Certainly one of the things that as I've stated, because of the variable interest rates, the interest rates can continue to go up. If we fix in the rates now, that's not going to happen. If we wait and say we're not going to participate at this point in time, the permanent rates that we become subject to if HUD forces us into a public offering later could be higher than the ones that we would be subject to should we participate at the end of March. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, Council, do you have any questions? Councilmember Tran, then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
No.
Thank you, Jeff, for your presentation. I think it makes sense for us to, lock into this conversion and have a fixed rate interest instead of variable. I do have a question, though. It said right here that the semi-annual payments, the payment will be made semi-annually rather than quarterly. But do we have the option to pay quarterly if we want to?
No.
No.
No, we would be paying semi-annually, and part of that goes to the way that the public offering would be structured, and the way that investors that would purchase the bonds that would be issued will be expecting, and the agreements about how payments will be made.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you very much. I'd like to explain before we vote why I'm going to be voting the way I'm going to vote. But first I have a question. The $13,560 that's coming out of CDBG funding for the cost to do this, was that expected?
Yes, it was.
So it's already been budgeted for?
Yes, it's something that can be included and used from our planning and admin dollars.
Okay. I had proposed at the last meeting, at the FedRec meeting when this came up, and I talked with staff about this before the last FedRec meeting, about going out for a bond for this, getting out of this loan, this CDBG loan, because I'm very concerned that if that hotel is not built, that we will never be in compliance with the jobs, and I'm very concerned about that. I know that we will be going out for a bond sometime this year for the interfund loan for the Performing Arts and Events Center. And it just seems to make sense to me with our high bond rating right now that we could put both together and somehow come up with a payment that would be reasonable for the city. This isn't my money, it's well, actually, it's taxpayers' money, and to me, I'm as I stated at the FedRec meeting, it's a risk that I'm not willing to take, knowing that if perhaps we are not in compliance, that this loan could be called, and we would have to pay it back as you described in the FedRec meeting.
The communication we've had with the folks at HUD headquarters over the past week has indicated that the city's loan would not be called, but perhaps sort of the worst case scenario would be the city would be discouraged from using CDBG to continue to service the loan, and we would have to continue to repay the loan past whatever point HUD made that decision. We'd have to use funds other than CDBG funds.
All right, thank you.
All right. And we've identified funds or REAP funds if that occurs. Council, any other questions? Councilor Duclos, do you have a motion?
Yes, I move approval of the proposed resolution authorizing the city to participate in a public offering via the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to convert from an interim variable rate to a long-term fixed rate, Section 108 loan for the Performing Arts and Event Center.
It's been a motion. A second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Nay.
Councilmember Safa-Dawson?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Tran?
Aye.
Councilmember Kopang?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Duclos?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much, Sarah, as well. All right. Council reports. Let's start with Councilmember Duclos.
I have nothing, thank you.
All right. Councilmember Moore.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I have something. I always do. There'll be a time where I'm going to miss my policy partner next to the left of me. First, I want to acknowledge my mentee, Bridget, for staying here, and it's nearly 9:30. And so I just want to say thank you for being here. I'm eager to have a discussion of what you've gotten out of this whole experience. But for those that don't know who Bridget is, she is, again, my mentee. We have a new mentorship mentee program, kind of like an internship, but really not intern. That's the easiest way to describe it. So I'm happy that you're here. So thank you. Mr. Mayor, I certainly enjoyed your State of the City address. I appreciated you talking about the Senior Citizens Commission, and I'm glad to be hearing that it's going to move forward. I know there's discussions on methods, but the most important part is that we're moving forward and giving people the power to be empowered and to be engaged, regardless if you're a youth or a senior citizen. And I think we need to continue to uplift all voices and ensure that we provide an opportunity for our senior citizens to give us advice on what can we do to make our city a better place for everybody, including our senior citizens. And I know it's an issue that's been on my mind for at least a couple of years, and I'm glad to see this issue moving forward. And I know that you and I have talked about this, and I've talked to some of my colleagues about this issue, and certainly have mentioned it during my public comment time. Also, thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for making this part of your Parks and Recreation Committee update. I have requested for us to have a conversation with Thomas for how do we, not just with the Parks and Human Services Committee, but provide a greater opportunity for enhancing our transparency and being able to look at broadcasting all committees. Because I think nowadays people want more information at their fingertips. And with technology, I know that we can walk towards a solution that can be a win-win, because I know there's a lot of sensitivities on staff time and hours that are being spent on this. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and looking forward to bringing that information directly to the public. Light rail, sound transit. Dana discussed this during her public comment. I wanted to say thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, this has been on my mind, and I plan to have a conversation with you and, of course, Chairman Copain, as he is the Land Use and Transportation Committee. But, I would like to request that we think of a social media campaign, or we think of some sort of PR campaign to really notify the public on, we ask for your patience during construction periods, and the purpose and what the end goal is going to be. Because for me, I know that people are going to be aggravated when they see all the constructions, and I'm sure you're aware of this, and I know it's on your mind. But I want to do everything that I can and that we can as a city to become obsessed with communicating that to the public and saying it's going to be hectic. We get the frustrations, we understand, but please bear with us, because in the end, our city is going to prosper from so many different ways. So I look forward to having the conversation, because I'm confident that you've already been thinking about things like that. Also, I wanted to, just my last point, I wanted to kind of specify again why I voted no on the family shelter, and wanted to respond to my colleague, Councilmember Duclos, with her comment, and that's under option 2. With the $40,000, they're still going to be serving the now, even under option 2. So I felt like, because it was called a question, I wanted to respond to that. So I'm using my council report to respond to that. So it's important to note that option 2, they would have still been served in the now, but it's really important to think about permanent solutions. And I know that we're moving in that direction, obviously. Thank you so much.
All right, Councilmember Copain.
I had the opportunity to go to the Pac-12 Women's Swimming and Diving Championships at the Aquatics Center, and for those of you that did not make it to that, they do have the men's swimming this week. Great event. I think did talk to a few families that came from one family. Their daughter dove for Utah, and Utah State, and they really loved. They're from Nevada, but they really loved Federal Way. And obviously with the picture-perfect weather that we had, clear skies, it was beautiful. It was like wet rain. It never rains here, right? So it was definitely definitely an LTAC kind of weekend. So
Yeah.
anyway, beyond that, a great competition, and again, that facility continues to show well and really is an asset to our community that I think we should continue to appreciate. And sometimes I think those kind of assets, they kind of we drive by them so often we forget they're there. But like the Rhododendron Garden, like the Bonsai Museum, these are the Hylobos. I mean, there's so many assets that we have in the city that people just don't necessarily take the time to go see or be part of. Here you have a short window of opportunity to go see some great swimming, see some future Olympians. I definitely encourage you to go this week. And then got to go to the Rotary Gala the Saturday before last. A great event. It was held out in Enumclaw this year, but they are bringing the dollars back to Federal Way as they've done every year, and continue to support the BAG program, which is a program that provides food for students in our public schools to get them through the weekend. So it's just a very valuable service. That is a service that is been done in partnership with a number of different churches. The Kiwanis is also still very involved in that. So again, I think it's a great community effort with a lot of people partnering together, a lot of groups partnering together to make that a reality. The last thing I want to comment on is on the ribbon cutting for the Panther Lake Trail. I was on the Parks Commission along with Councilmember Moore when we began that process, and it's great to see that finally come to fruition. It took a lot of time, and it got more and more expensive, and then we worked on value engineering. Well, the commission certainly worked in partnership with the staff, but again, staff, and I think in particular Steve Eicher, did a great job in coming up with solutions, working with the agencies to make sure that we got that done as cost effectively as possible. And again, that's going to be an asset that we can enjoy for years to come. So very pleased to see that finally come to fruition. And with that, I'll conclude my report.
All right, Councilmember Tran?
Thank you, Mayor, but I don't have anything.
Great. Councilmember Johnson?
Mr. Mayor, I also wanted to second Councilmember Kopang's point about the Panther Lake Trail. Awesome facility. It looks like it's going to be an amazing opportunity for folks in our city that enjoy biking or walking or whatever you like to do to enjoy. So I got to come in at the tail end in parks, but I'm really happy about that. So great work. Also wanted to, I think last Friday, I was able to go to Camelot Elementary School to read to some youth. I think Councilmember Kopang and Stephen Dawson were there as well as some of our police officers and South King Fire. So awesome opportunity to talk to first graders, get asked some pretty crazy questions, but it was really fun. So, definitely recommend doing that. And then also, I got to attend the 21st Annual Asian Pacific Cultural Center celebration at the Tacoma Dome a couple weekends back. The Federal Way High School Polynesian Club performed, did an amazing job as always. They're always pretty cool. Would love to see them at the PAC pretty soon, so hopefully we can get them at the PAC, but great job to them. And then finally, we have the Young Life event this Friday, so they're having their annual fundraiser at the community center. So if you haven't bought a ticket, definitely recommend that. And then I think that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Councilmember Stephen Dawson.
Thank you, Mayor. I enjoyed going to Camelot. I got to read children's books written by a friend of mine who uses Ethiopian stories. And so reading about children's books, but also, Ethiopian. But then at the end of the book, there was a picture of the actual character, and so they were really impressed to hear that it wasn't just a book, but it actually had a person. So that was really interesting to them, and some were curious about Ethiopia, and all of them know about Africa, but not Ethiopia, so that was a great learning moment and opportunity for the kids, so that was fun. One of the initiatives from Sound Cities Association is African American Male Wellness Walk, and it's planned for July 20th. And so one of the challenges is that they want cities, if possible, to form a group, a team, and see which city wins, like a competition. So I'm going to put that out. As soon as we get the flyer, I'm going to probably post it on Facebook. So help get the word out and help people's participation. It's free walk. It's going to be in Renton. And so we're really hoping to get people out there, and especially to promote and do education around health for African American males. But the walk is for everyone. So I would highly encourage participation and also getting the word out. July 20th, Saturday. And that ends my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Wow, look at the time. This is for you a day. He wanted to go home early. As some folks know, I'm involved in this Federal Way Seroptimus Club, and every year we have an event called Flag Day, which is, this year is June 15th, and this year will be our 30th anniversary of Flag Day, which is very exciting to us. I believe, well, maybe not, but we got an invitation as a council to attend the Washington State Patriotic Day, which was on February 23rd, the same day as the Rotary event, and it was the 3rd annual Washington State Patriotic Day. It was held at Stadium High School, which is my high school, and it's always awesome to go back and see the castle. And one of the reasons I went, besides the fact that I love patriotic music and being around folks who love patriotic things, is I wanted to do some research for Flag Day. And this was pretty darn amazing. I have to say I was blown away with what I saw. They had 79 units coming in holding flags and walking around the gym with the flags. They had children as young as tiger cubs to senior citizens, some really, old senior citizens, and it was just amazing. Bruce Dameyer, who's the Pierce County executive, was a keynote speaker. The Army Band played many, many songs. We had probably 7 ROTC units there from different schools in Pierce County. What I was disappointed in is that it is very much a Pierce County event, but they did invite us. I know that I received an invitation, and I don't know why I would have if you guys hadn't. And I would like to, in the future, try to make this more a King County, Pierce County event, because it was just amazing. And it will happen next year on February 24th, I believe. And I believe that's George Washington's birthday. Your history, is that true? Okay. But this was actually based to celebrate his birthday. This is one of the reasons that they did it at that time of the year. And I've talked with our ROTC folks here in Federal Way to get maybe some of our, we have 2 ROTC units here in Federal Way, one at Todd Beamer, one at Federal Way High School. And my mentee, Katie, is in ROTC at Federal Way High School, to see if they can go, because they give prizes out, and there are three different levels of prizes, but the first is $500, and they divide it into age groups. So 3 ROTC groups got some funding, which is a good thing. But that was really, really exciting. So, but don't forget Flag Day on June 15th at the Weyerhaeuser King County Aquatics Center, and it's our 30th anniversary, and we have some new things that we're going to be doing this year to celebrate the 30th anniversary. On February 24th at Twin Lakes Golf and Country Club, there was an autism auction and art walk. This was highlighted in the Federal Way Mirror, which is why I went. It was in conjunction with Friends of Troop 361 here in Federal Way. It's 2 parents whose children have some developmental special needs, and they found when their little guys got into school that the special needs classes had some very special needs in equipment and toys and books and things that the districts were not providing because of funding. And so these two moms got together and put on this auction, and it was absolutely amazing. I go to a lot of fundraising things all the time. You know, this is fundraising season right now. And usually the first time you put on an auction, you have a lot of issues. You have issues with paying, you have issues with setting up. These two women were absolutely amazing. Everything went really, really well. We had a number of our police officers there interacting with children. And the other thing was there were a lot of little kids there. And you just would not, I think you just had to be there to see how amazing it was for a first-time event. The fire department was there with one of the fire trucks, and the kids could get on the truck. They could go on one of the Honda motorcycles from the police department. They could get their pictures taken with the police. We had some princesses come for the little girls. And this is going to be an annual event. I would really encourage supporting this because it was just absolutely amazing. But the art part is children with autism like to use their hands, and they paint. And there are art pieces throughout the entire room, and you could buy some art, which I did, and I'll bring it into the office. And it was from a little girl named Ava, and it's called Living Room. But it's just, she was 3, so you'll have to see it. The other thing I'd like to say is that during our budget season, I talked a lot about youth activities, as did several other council members, if not all. And I suggested many times that we have a comprehensive list of what kind of activities we have for youth and children in Federal Way. So I'm going to be starting that. And if you know of any activities for youth from 0 to 21, could you please send them to me? Because I would like by this summer to have something out there for the parents and guardians and babysitters and those who are going to be entertaining children this summer. And it's going to be a lot of work, but I think it's very necessary that we have something for Federal Way. And it is before 10 o'clock. Awesome.
That's great. Okay, with that, we are adjourned.